Okay, here we're going to take a look. Let me see. Okay, here we're going to take a look at federal income tax withholding for 2020. One deduction that must be taken from gross wages that we've talked about in the payroll basics is income tax, federal income tax. If the state also has an income tax, then we have to take out state income tax. And if the employee works in a city then that has income tax, we need to take it out of there too. But regardless of whether they're city or state, we always, across the country, have to take out federal income tax withholding. If the employee makes more than $100,000 a year, then we have to use what's called the percentage tables. If the employee makes under $100,000 a year, then we use the wage bracket tables. So you'll have to know which of those two situations. So for our class, most of the employees that we're going to work with are under the 100,000. So we're going to mostly use the wage bracket tables. We will have to use the percentage table sometimes. Okay, now in 2020, the percentage and wage bracket tables were removed from the Circular E, where they had been for a zillion years, and put into their own separate booklet called the Publication 15T. Income tax withholding in the past was based on the taxes due on several criteria. How frequently was the employee paid? The frequency of wages. Were they paid every week, once a month, every 2 weeks? How frequently were they paid? Were they single or married? And that was shown on the W-4 form that the employee filled out on the day that they first started working. They filled out a W-4 that said whether they were single or married. There were no other filing statuses. Either you were single or you were married. And it had how many allowances were you going to take out. And so generally there was a rule of thumb that they could fill out. And we talked about that in the payroll basics slideshow. So the rule of thumb that if they had one allowance for themselves, one for their spouse if they were married filing jointly, and one for each dependent they were planning on claiming on their income tax return. So that was the rule of thumb. Or they could fill out a worksheet if they wanted to be able to take more than the rule of thumb exemption allowances. Okay? And then how much was their gross wages for that pay period? All of that stuff was the criteria that we needed to be able to figure out how much income tax was withheld. Now, currently, on the income tax return, there's no personal or dependency exemptions like there used to be. So the withholding tables that used to be figured on these allowances, okay, now they had to be refigured to not include those exemption allowances. They're primarily calculated on filing status alone. So a new W-4 was made, and we talked about that in the payroll basics video. So the new revised form, or any employee that's new has to file this, plus any employee that was an existing employee before 2020, but they had to change something on their W-4, so they have to file the new W-4. If they were an existing employee from before 2020 and they don't have any changes, then they do not need to file the new W-4. We will continue on calculating out their paycheck in the payroll department using their old W-4. Now, the new revised W-4 asks each employee which filing status they will use to file their income taxes. So either single or married filing separate, or married filing joint, or head of household are the three basic categories that they're going to choose when they fill out their W-4. Okay, if they have no extenuating circumstances beyond that, then that's it. They're done with the W-4, and we will figure out their withholding based on just their filing status alone. Okay, now, if they do have some other additional wages besides working for our company, they have a different job, they have their own business, they have income from, who knows, a pension or something else, that they need to further fill out this W-4. They can't just stop by saying, oh, here's my filing status and I'm all done. Okay? They now have to estimate those additional incomes that are coming into the household. If they received child tax credit on their last income tax return and they expect to have it again this year, there's a space where they can do that. That'll help reduce their withholding. Or if they used itemized deductions last year and they expect to use itemized deductions this year, then they can put that also on a separate line on the new W-4, and that will also help reduce their withholdings. Okay, so if they have any of these extra incomes or extra deductions or extra credits, then they can fill out those lines, and that will either increase or decrease the amount of withholding that's going to come out of their paycheck. Okay, if we have one of these situations, instead of using the tables, we have to use the withholding estimator, also called the withholding calculator. It's provided by the IRS.gov. It's a little Excel thing, and I have it loaded on D2L. So if you have one of these type of situations, you have to use that calculator. Now, if you have a situation where you just had one of those basic ones where they just put in their filing status and that's all they put in, then you can use the tables or you can use the withholding estimator, either one. So the publication 15T is the tables, and they're basically divided into two parts. And those two parts are further divided into two parts. So there's four main parts that we have to worry about ourselves in this class. There are also a few extra parts that's in the 15T that we're not going to worry about. So we have the percentage tables. Remember, that's for the people who make more than $100,000. And we have the wage bracket tables, and that's for the people who make less than $100,000. The percentage tables are divided out for into employees that filled out the new W-4 and just filled out their filing status, or the employees that were existing employees and they're still on the old W-4. So we have two different sets of tables for the percentage tables. And the same thing for wage bracket. We got to know, is this a new W-4 employee that just has filing status, or is this an existing employee that has the old W-4? If it is a new employee, but they have one of those extra lines filled out, like we just talked about, we have to use that Excel estimator thing. We cannot use these tables. So for class, most of the time, for assignments and for the exam problems, we'll just, you'll just be told and you'll be using these tables. Okay, and in fact, for the most part, we'll be working with the wage bracket tables. Some of them will be for the new W-4s with just a filing status, but we will also, especially in the beginning, we'll be using a lot of the existing W-4 employees because those match the way that the old videos and show you how to do. So that's what we're going to use a lot at the beginning. Okay, occasionally we will use the percentage tables. And we'll also learn how to use the Excel withholding estimator. So for the existing W-4, which means that they were employees who were hired in 2019 or earlier, we're going to use the table called Wage Bracket Method Tables for Manual Payroll Systems with Forms W-4 from 2019 or earlier. That's what it's called, and it's under Section 3 in the publication 15T. It starts on page 22. Okay? And they work exactly the same way as the old tables worked, which I showed you how to do in the Payroll Basics video. So what if we have the new W-4, okay, and they just filled out their filing status, okay? These are kind of similar to the old tables. You have to know the payroll frequency, how often are the checks being paid out, monthly, weekly, whatever. There is our columns for the filing status. Then the filing status is further divided into two columns, one for standard withholding, one for step 2 checkbox withholding. This is based on an employee who has more than one job. They have a job with our company and then they also have some outside jobs. So we're not going to worry about those. We'll be using the standard withholding. Okay, that's one we'll use in class. Okay, you're going to find the correct payroll frequency page, go down the left for the wage amount, and across to the correct filing status column to find the correct withholding amount.